Hello and welcome to Soundcheck by Support. Today I am joined by Lindy Morrison, who is I'll hand over to you, Lindy. What's your role at Support Act?
I'm the National Welfare Coordinator for Support Act, Luke.
National Welfare Coordinator, there you go. For anyone who's tuning in today and is feeling like they are in need of support, Support Act offers a service called the Support Act Wellbeing Helpline, which is available on 1-800-959-500 and staffed by qualified mental health practitioners who are there to support people who work in the music industry, whether you are an artist, crew worker or music worker. So today I thought it was high time that we had a guest from Support Act. So thanks for joining us, Lindy.
Very happy to have been invited, Luke. I'm a big fan of the show.
I think what would be great to hear from you, Lindy, you've been with Support Act for maybe you can give us a little bit of the history of Support Act and how you've seen things change over the years to where we are now, responding to the COVID-19 crisis.
Very happy to. So Support Act was set up in 1998 by a bunch of music industry people who, led by a music publisher called, that a lot of people my age remember, called John Brommel. They were very concerned about people who'd worked in the industry falling on hard times as they got older. So they decided to set up Support Act. It was really led by a really great woman and man, Meryl Gross, and Jim, her partner, Meryl had worked at the ABC and Jim had worked at PPCA. And they got a committee together with people like Michael McMartin, the Hoodoo Gurus manager, and of course Chuggy, and set the Support up as a company, a charity, authorised charity, and then pretty soon they employed me at 3 hours a week as a social worker. So I had a social work degree that I'd got at Queensland University before I became a professional musician. I was, at that time, I was sitting I've been elected to the PPCA board. The PPCA is the Collection Society for the licenses for the use of the sound recording. It's like it's the APRA of the sound recording. And Jim White, who was on PPCA and was also on Support, I knew I had a degree and asked me would I do that job. So that was in 1998. And I was we didn't have a CEO, we didn't have any staff. It was just me for about 10 years or even longer, probably 15 years. And the board was my boss. And what they were very, very keen to get a lot of money in the bank. They were building up the funds. So they were very, very good at, we would have every year at Melbourne Cup Day, we'd have a huge event at Randwick Racecourse to raise funds. The board were incredibly active in raising funds all over Australia. So they built up the funds, and at the same time we were, I guess, discussing, arguing about policy. Who we were going to support, how we were going to support them, what was the cap, how long should have someone been working professionally in the industry, were we going to contribute to funerals? Lots of discussions about stuff. It's very hard to come up with, qualifications and eligibility requirements because people have to be professional to come to us, and music industry workers. One of the biggest discussions was about contributions to funeral, and in the end, we decided to contribute to funerals because Gadinsky and Chuggy were very keen that we do that, particularly for crew, because many crew die broke and alone, and we felt that everyone should be entitled to have a great send-off. So about 8 years ago, the charity was in a position to start getting a CEO. Our first CEO was a woman called Jo Cave, And she built up the organisation somewhat. In fact, we got a finance officer, we got a communications officer, we got admin, which was fantastic. And
you must have felt like all of a sudden you've got all of these people around you after such a long period of time, Lindy. It must have been a massive change.
It was a massive change. It was massive change, you know, to have worked by myself for so long, and then to have, you know, a team around me. It was incredibly exciting, and the changes were really remarkable. How quickly it all happened. In that, you know, the organisation got a lot more flexible in who we could help. That was probably the most important thing for me. It was widened. It was a 10-year working professionally in the industry up until then, and then that was changed to 5 years working professionally in the industry, which is so much better. The cap on grants grew, so I could give bigger grants. What we could give in grants became more interesting and more diverse. So it was really great. And then Joe left about 2-3 years ago, and our new CEO came on, Clive Miller, and then we expanded in a very, very big way. I mean, someone like you came on board. You know, our finance team grew.
To support in the social work department.
And we have another social worker in Melbourne. Thank you, Michael Gudinski, who contributed to that. He really wanted to see a social worker in Melbourne, even though we are national, but he wanted to see a presence there, which is, you know, you in Melbourne as well. Our communications grew, everything grew. And our fundraising teams, I mean, obviously I don't have anything to do with fundraising, but the fundraising grew exponentially.
And obviously the fundraising helps, you know, the welfare team, the social work team respond to the demand that we now see. The music industry is probably in a different place where people are coming forward and asking for help more than they were probably once upon a time. But Lindy, going back to like those early days, I mean, did it feel to you groundbreaking what you were doing way back when Support Act first started doing its thing, and the fact that you were supporting people in the music industry in a way that they hadn't been before? I
honestly couldn't believe that it was happening. It really was fantastic that the industry came together the way they did. And you know, the industry's so often been divided on issues going back over the last 40, 50 years. And, you know, the publishers and the labels come together, the collection societies come together, the managers, the agents, but it's not just the businesses like that. It's also the all out in the community. There are always community groups raising money, and we have seen such a growth in that. There's 50 community groups that we're aware of right now raising money for Support Act, yeah. So that was that's been a big change. What else has been a change is a lot of people didn't know about Support Act, you know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. So getting the word out there, it's been slow, but, you know, I think this will change everything now, the impact of COVID-19 and the fact that the federal government has given us a grant to deliver to people who've been impacted. This will make a very big difference to everyone knowing about Support Act as well. It was also getting a communications team, you know, people in your job and getting a better website, getting a social media presence, all this stuff, all this really only happened in the last 5 years. And I've been with Support Act since '98, so that's 22 years.
So let's go back to the beginning of your story then, Lindy. What were you up to before you worked for Support Act?
Well, after the Go-Betweens finished, because I was the drummer in the Go-Betweens from 1980 to 1990, then I had a couple of years in a band with Amanda Brown called Cleopatra Wong. But I had a child which completely changed my life in that I actually had to give up touring and playing. And I had to get jobs. So I worked for at least 20 years in community music running community music projects all over Australia. It was really fantastic, I have to say.
Yeah, sure.
So, you know, drum pageants on a Rockhampton River, drum shows in a cathedral in Mackay.
That's my neck of the woods, Lindy.
I beg your pardon, what?
That's my neck of the woods.
Oh, really? I love it up there. You know, love it. I did a community show about the history of, I was director of the music in a community show about the history of Mount Isa.
Oh, wow.
8 weeks living up there. Had to run a parade in Beachport, South Australia. It's a great area to work in. And, you know, I had my day there in that, you know, but of course, music changes, styles of music change, and electronic music, hip hop and rap became popular, and that's not my field. So I didn't get as much work. And I was also very involved in copyright, and you know, I've been very, very interested in widening the rights for performers. And, you know, consequently, I've sat on PBCA board in a way to guard the rights for performers. But I went and got a master's in legal studies at UNSW, and I taught copyright in the TAFE system in some of the universities for years and years and years, until I really had enough of teaching. But I have a great love of copyright and the protection of people's rights. There's nothing copy left about me at all.
All right, so coming back into the present and how Support Act responded to COVID-19, what are your reflections now on when that all started to kick off, and what we've been able to do as an organisation to try and help people as much as we could in kind of a limited financial environment to where we are now?
Are you saying that before we got the funding from the federal government? Well, of course, I was quite terrified about the fact that we would have so many people coming to us and we wouldn't have the funds to distribute. And you know, I was incredibly nervous, and it was very, very stressful, because I could see how many people had nothing. They had nothing, and they had their rent to pay and their food bills and everything. And we were being inundated, literally inundated by applications. And you couldn't start delivering because you knew you didn't have enough. And it seemed to be unfair that the first past the post would be given help and all the rest. And I could see it. I could see what was going to happen. I knew there'd be thousands and thousands of applications. So it was terrifying. It was a very stressful time. And I you know, don't really want to live through that again. And I think we'll be prepared. You know, we've become prepared now. Once the funding came, we knew that we had to employ more social workers, administrators, finance assistants to start delivering grant packages to all these people who are applying. We've had to work through the backlog, and we're almost through that now. We're getting on top of the new ones. I mean, it could have only happened in that we had already the structures in place to deliver. So it was so fortunate to do that. We've had to streamline. Simplicity, speed are kind of the key words here now. But you still have to look at every application to make sure they qualify, to make sure people are eligible. So it's not just ticking one box. It's really looking very closely at the applications to make sure that they qualify for assistance.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I've always thought since I first discovered Support Act, and the first time I had heard of Support Act as a career professional musician, was when I applied for this role, which since I've taken up this job, and obviously the profile of the organisation keeps going up and up, but it's certainly something that I'm dedicated towards, is making sure that everybody knows about what we do, because it is a service that is so unique in the world, that we support our own community in the way that we do. But post COVID-19, and based on the kind of cases you would see traditionally before COVID-19, what do you think, how do you think our practice will change with how we provide crisis relief after we've responded to COVID-19? Do you see any changes?
Well, yes, I do. I mean, so much of what our processes were not written down. You know, there was so much in my head, and so that's not good. You know, so we've been forced to write it all down, and I've had to have a lot of help there because it's just so second nature to me. So that means, you know, that we now have a succession plan, which is really good for when I drop off the perch, as they say. So I couldn't be happier than that. Also, I think that a lot more people will have, you know, the majority of people in Australia who work in the industry will now be aware of Support Act after this period. And so I expect more people will come to us with illness and accidents. You know, when they're, you know, we'll have more funerals, we'll have more people coming to us when they're dying and need help. You know, aged people who just can't afford something. So, you know, I'm really, really happy about this, you know, that at last Support Act has a role to play, and that people not that we haven't had a role to play, but that in this role, more and more people are going to discover us.
Exactly. Now, I'm conscious that you have lots of work to get on with.
Yes, I have, and that was very well done.
But before I haven't stopped recording just yet, but before I let you go, I just want to say that in my job, I know that plenty of people out there for 22 years that you've been working with Support Act, you hold so much like capital out there, so much positivity towards Lindy Morrison. So it's a pleasure to work with you. Thanks for being on Soundcheck today.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I love the show. Thanks very much. Very kind. Okay.
Excellent.
See you, mate.
Yeah.
Bye.